Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Rapid Recap on the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel and Inside Nebraska podcast. He's Steve Marik, he's Greg Smith, and I'm just Zack Carpenter. We're here at Memorial Stadium after the first day of Nebraska Spring Ball boys, and we are waiting. Top 30 countdown, top 50 countdown, whatever
depth chart,
you like.
depth chart season.
Yeah,
right.
Steve grinding away for hours on end, literally hours on end to come up with a depth chart projection, but we met today with Matt Rhule, a host of players, Luke Reimer, Heinrich Harburg, and a
Ethan
couple
Piper.
others, Ethan Piper.
Gabe Irvin.
And a lot of takeaways, but obviously most newsworthy right off the bat is 3 players are no longer on the teams. Tyreek Johnson, former 5-star defensive back, and then 2 tight ends, Chris Hickman and James Carney, the 2 former in-state tight ends. So Nebraska is now down to 98 scholarship players, 6 tight ends, and 23 defensive backs, which are 2 of the position groups where we kind of thought we would see some guys probably be leaving the program at some point.
Not a big surprise on any of those 3. I don't think anybody would be surprised about Chris Hickman, Tyreek, especially Tyreek Johnson, and then James Carney. The path for playing time for those 3 just was getting longer and longer and longer. So not a huge surprise, but also a newsy press conference with Matt Rhule. 3 position changes also, and we can get into that too, but we can talk about the suspensions. 2 players suspended also, starting running back from last season, Anthony Grant suspended, and also Tommy Hill, who started his season last year at defensive back. He started at corner. Things didn't go too well. He got moved to receiver in the middle of the season. He's back at DB right now, but suspended from practice. And so Anthony Grant and Tommy Hill not practicing to start spring ball.
Yeah, and on those suspensions, I think that anytime you have a situation like Tommy Hill where he went through what he went through last year, he's starting this, I guess not even season, spring football off suspended coming out of winter conditioning, and then you also have a crowded position room with a new coach, you start to wonder about that, right? Like, where's this going for him? I think it's kind of natural to kind of think about it that way to see where things go for him and how much longer he could be with the program, or if he kind of gets Zach together and kind of gets things rolling.
Yeah, defensive back. I think that's one of the, I think it was 2 weeks ago, whenever we met with Rhule last, he sort of subtly said, guys, we have a lot of defensive backs. Like
He did say that.
Backs is a lot to have on the roster. So Tyreek Johnson, like I said, former 5-star and played 3 years at Ohio State. He was a former 14th ranked overall player in the country, number 1 ranked safety, but things just haven't worked out for him as many would have thought on the recruiting trail when he was coming out of Jacksonville, Florida. So Rhule said that all 3 of those guys have left the program on their own. But like Steve mentioned, Gabe Irvin, it was funny right before, and Greg wanted to tell you this story, right before Rhule walked out, I asked Steve, I was like, all right, if we were drafting a team of players, just me and you, so 2 people, who would be the second running back you would take? Because in agreement, A.J. Allen would be the first running back we take. And we were both in agreement, like Gabe Irvin, really like that guy, like probably would take a stab at him as the second running back. And then Rhule came out and said that Anthony Grant is suspended. So that was kind of serendipitous of the situation in the running back room, which probably one of the strengths on the roster right now. Yeah. But Gabe Irvin, I was listening to your guys' spring football preview podcast, and Steve was on the money. He said that Gabe Irvin, just if you look at it, he looks like he's up to at least 220 pounds, and Rhule confirmed that he's around 221, 222. What were takeaways from Gabe Irvin Jr., guy with a lot of potential and really well built?
So I was over there with him when he talked. He talked very long, but he had some really interesting things to say, or things that kind of lend itself to what Rhule was talking about. Gabe said that what he wanted to do this offseason was just basically make it through healthy, build on kind of how he was coming into it, feeling good with his body, and he was able to do that. Made it through winter conditioning, obviously healthy. Obviously, he's making an impact and an impression on the new coaching staff as well. And so I decided it's good to see that from him, because he's a kid that you hear good things about behind the scenes too, as someone that's been a leader with, 39 new players into the program, 41 if you count the 2 guys that came back. And Gabe Irvin has been vocal in helping those guys out as well, so it's good to see from him.
Determination and having the correct mindset is like so big for running backs, and I think that's exactly what Gabe Irvin has. I mean, if you watched his tape from last season, he wasn't the starter, he wasn't even the backup, but he got some reps in that Oklahoma game. And if you go back and watch Gabe Irvin against Oklahoma, that guy was really running pissed off, and he wanted to be out there. And I think it meant a lot to him to be out on the field and start getting some carries again. And to hear Matt Rhule come out and say he was a star of the offseason at 6'1", 222 pounds, Matt Rhule said he's one of the fastest players on the team if you're looking at those GPS numbers from those catapult technology that the players wear. That's really good to hear for the running back room, especially when you hear the uncertain status with Anthony Grant. But Rhule went on to say that he thinks that Gabe Ervin can be that battering ram in the fourth quarter because he wants 75 yards rushing in the fourth quarter, and he thinks if you can get that mark, 75 yards rushing in the fourth quarter, that's usually like equaling maybe like a shutout type fourth quarter where the offense stays on the field, the defense stays off the field, and you can just control the ball. So I think when you're looking at Gabe Ervin, that's a Big Ten built running back that I think you can give the ball to, and like Matt Rhule said, be that battering ram that I think the offense badly needs.
And he said that. Gabe Ervin said that. It actually reminded me. Sorry, I forgot to say that. But he did say that Gabe Ervin, that he wants to be that type of big back for the team. And I thought it was interesting that he actually just kind of came right out and said that. So that makes sense because I did not hear that with Matt Rhule when he said that. That's a really good note. I'm sure the fans loved hearing that.
Yeah, the battering ram quote stood out right away because I remember, glad you mentioned the Oklahoma game because after that game, I know Steve was just mentioning it in the press box and after the game about how strong Gabe Ervin was running. So then when he came back for the Indiana game, was taking an extra look at those reps, and he was just running downhill, just not afraid of anything, of any physical contact. So you have the juxtaposition of the different types of running backs that they have in that room, which I said earlier, it really does have a potential to be major strength of this offense and of this team. Steve, I wanted to just kind of tee you up for some of the position changes and some of the things that you noticed there, because I know you were pretty intrigued and excited to hear about some of the goings-ons with what Rhule was talking about.
Yeah, so 3 position changes that Rhule mentioned, and let's kick it off on the offensive side of the ball. There's only one on defense, but on the offensive side of the ball, Janiran Bonner, who started his career at wide receiver, a really big physical guy from Georgia, was a really good, I think, 4-star recruit. Got here. He didn't play at all last year, so he started his career wide receiver, but Matt Rhule looked at him, saw the kind of physicality, and he's moved to tight end as kind of a hybrid. Matt Rhule called it an F role, which is kind of just a hybrid tight end wide receiver.
Is that a SAT thing?
I don't know.
I had never heard that until he said that.
Well, here's the thing. Go back and watch Marcus Satterfield's offense at South Carolina. You're going to see Jaheim Bell play exactly that role, what I think they have in mind for somebody like Janiran Bonner, just an athletic. He's 6'3", I think he's listed on the roster, and he's up to 217 pounds. Matt Rhule said his goal is to get him up to 222 pounds. So that just looks like Jaheim Bell in South Carolina's offense last year. So go back, have fun watching with that because he's a freak athlete, and I think they see something in Janiran Bonner as a guy who can line up maybe potentially in the not maybe as much as like an inline tight end, but like a step back in the backfield, maybe in the slot a little bit, take some handoffs, do some cool things like that, and just be creative like Marcus Satterfield was. So that was one with Janiran Bonner. The other one was Jake Applegate, the former Lincoln Southeast Knight. He started off as an edge last year in his first season in the program, but he has since moved to tight end at 6'4". We all saw Jake Applegate.
Yeah, he did it in high school.
Yeah, absolutely.
I watched it a lot.
He was a really great receiver. He has awesome hands. So he's up to 236 pounds at 6'4". Just looks like a tight end. He's growing into a tight end body. And so if they didn't really see a path of playing time with Jake Applegate at edge, maybe there's something there at tight end. And so it's obvious, just talking about this out loud, how Matt Rhule really likes tight ends, I think. And so
it comes up a lot.
He's seeing like a lot of potential in tight end bodies here.
Big reason, I think, why he hired Marcus Satterfield as his OC.
That makes sense.
Because of the love for that position.
Yes, absolutely. And then last one, Brody Tagaloa, who came here as a defensive lineman, was moved to tight end, has moved back for defensive line, and he's going to be limited in the spring, so we're not going to be hearing a lot about Brody Tagaloa, but back from the tight end room to the defensive line for Brody Tagaloa. So that was the 3.
Yeah. Any last observations before we get out of here, Greg? Anything that stood out?
Yeah, I think that the big thing to me was about setting the standard for Matt Rhule. I think that, everybody gets excited about coming out and being able to actually see the guys do football stuff and have a football out there. The coaches were tired of kind of just watching them lift weights and all of that and want to see football activities. But Matt Rhule kind of dialed it back a little bit and said that you have to start with kind of setting the standard. Did everybody get here on time? And they did. Was everybody dressed appropriately? Did they know their assignments? Because things are going to be different. I think that as much as Matt Rhule has talked about the details without explicitly saying we're going to be about the details, I think is something that will bleed over to the football team. And it's important for them to get that going right away. I think that that's something that we'll be watching for throughout the spring.
Yeah, I mean, we asked Rhule and any other assistant coach, if anytime we asked him about personnel questions, it was always sort of the same rhetoric of have to wait until spring ball, see them out there on the field and get our own eyes on them and have those evaluations in place. And one day of spring ball is not going to be the determining factor of we now know all these different things about all of our players. I think it's sort of just right now, sort of in that feeling out process. I mean, probably had a good idea of which guys could be up for position changes. You saw that the three guys that Steve talked about. So still sort of that chemistry building off season, and today was day one. I mean, between the coaches, coach to coach and coach to players, still sort of building that out. So I think it's gonna still take quite a while for us to know more personnel-wise from what the coaching staff knows personnel-wise. But Steve, any last thoughts?
We should probably mention the quarterbacks. So Casey Thompson and Logan Smothers, both limited. I know there were some questions surrounding about how much some of those guys were going to do in this spring. As of Monday, they weren't throwing. They didn't throw. Casey Thompson, Logan Smothers did not throw on Monday's practice. So both will be limited. And also can't get out of here without mentioning Thomas Fidone. Matt Rhule joked that Thomas is mad at Matt Rhule because he's holding him out, but Matt Rhule is very careful with past ACL injuries and just wants to be very, very careful and make sure that the correct amount of time is taken with those types of injuries. So Thomas Fidone is being limited to start spring practice, but Matt Rhule said he's completely healthy. He's just wanting to be very careful with that guy because the potential is through the roof with him.
Oh, we should also say, because it happened right here, Heinrich Haarberg talked to the media today and did say, and one of the big questions is about whether or not he'll stay at quarterback. Right now he is practicing still at quarterback, and they're having him do that. But he was asked point blank by our own Jeff Ekstrom if he's willing to even talk about other positions, and he said he's very open to it. Like he said, whatever it takes to help the team, he'll do it. So that'll be something to kind of put a pin in and keep an eye on as well for sure.
I think that's a big deal because we all saw Heinrich Haarberg's dunk. I mean, it's fairly obvious that he has athleticism through the roof, and so he can kind of help out this team in different areas, I think. So I'm at 6'5", around 220 pounds. You can put that guy as an extreme athlete elsewhere, and I think he can maybe help out somewhere. So.
Right.
Yeah, one of my intriguing storylines from a day at Memorial Stadium, and more to come on Thursday. We're going to get our first open media practice window to get a first look at the guys, and then more media availability after that practice. Pro day on Wednesday. Pretty loaded slate of spring ball as far as media availability is concerned, and 4 open practice windows. Get to wind up talking to Rhule several times and all 10 assistant coaches. So looking forward to that. Today was just day one, so we've got plenty more to come on Inside Nebraska at nebraska.rivals.com and the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. Encourage you guys to like and subscribe to this video and subscribe to the entire feed to have those videos dropped right to you. So I don't think we have anything else. We're going to get out of here in a ice cold Memorial Stadium for whatever reason. It's freezing here, but Matt Rhule's wearing shorts. He said he wears shorts every day, even in the 20s and 30s when it's that cold out. But for Steve Marik, for Greg Smith, I'm Zack Carpenter, and we will catch you guys again next time.